"Move, bitch!" He shoved her, right there, in front of everyone. Dr. Carter Vale's hand hit Emma's shoulder so hard she stumbled into the supply cart, sending syringes scattering across the floor like broken teeth. The whole ER froze. Nurses, orderlies, everyone. Not one person said a word, because nobody ever did. Not when it came to Dr. Vale. He owned this place, or at least he believed he did, and belief in rooms like this was its own kind of weapon. Emma steadied herself. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply bent down and began picking up the syringes, one by one, quietly, while the doctor who had just humiliated her stood over her like he had won something. He had no idea what he had just woken up. If you're new here, welcome. Subscribe, hit that bell, and drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's go back to the beginning. The night shift at Mercy General Hospital started the way it always did for Emma Reyes, quietly. She clocked in at 6:58 p.m., 2 minutes before her shift officially began, the way she always did. She hung her jacket in her locker, smoothed the front of her scrubs, and pulled her dark hair back into a low ponytail with the efficiency of someone who had learned long ago that rituals are what separate order from chaos. The locker room smelled like burnt coffee and hand sanitizer. There was a motivational poster on the wall that someone had drawn a mustache on. Emma had never touched it. She had noticed it on her first day 18 months ago, and she had filed it away the same way she filed away everything. Observed, cataloged, and moved on. She was 34 years old. She had been called quiet her entire life. In elementary school, her teachers wrote it on her report cards. Quiet, but attentive. In high school, it showed up in a different form. Reserved, keeps to herself. In the military, nobody wrote it down, but they thought it until they didn't anymore. Until quiet became something else entirely. Something that made other people nervous in a way they couldn't quite articulate. But that was a different life, a different Emma. This Emma was just a nurse at a city trauma center, and she liked it that way. She pushed through the doors into the main ER bay and immediately read the room the way she always did. She had a habit of scanning any space she entered in under 4 seconds. Exits, obstacles, people, threat levels, old habits. There were 14 patients currently being managed across 6 bays. 3 critical, 2 borderline, the rest stable. The charge nurse, Delia, a stout woman in her 50s with reading glasses perpetually perched on her forehead, caught Emma's eye from across the station and gave her a look that said, "Tonight is already a lot." Emma gave a small nod. She tied on her ID badge and got to work. For the first hour, things moved the way trauma nights often do. A man with a dislocated shoulder. A 12-year-old with a suspected fracture after a skateboarding fall. An elderly woman whose blood pressure had spiked dangerously and who kept insisting she was fine and that her daughter was overreacting. Emma moved between them without fuss, drawing blood, reading charts, adjusting IV drips with the kind of calm focus that experienced nurses develop over years, and that newer nurses often mistake for indifference. It was not indifference. It was control. There is a profound difference. And then, at 8:17 p.m., the radio crackled. Ambulance incoming, teenage female, blunt force trauma to the abdomen, BP dropping, ETA 4 minutes. The ER shifted into a different gear. That particular announcement, teenage, dropping BP, 4 minutes, it had a way of pulling every professional in the room up straight. Delia started calling assignments. Bay 3, get a trauma cart prepped. Someone call upstairs and give surgery a heads up. Emma was already moving, already pulling on a fresh pair of gloves, already positioning herself at Bay 3 where the gurney would come in. She was checking the crash cart inventory when she heard his voice. Who authorized Bay 3? I want Bay 5 cleared. Bay 3 has suboptimal lighting and I am not doing a trauma assessment under suboptimal lighting. Dr. Carter Vale had arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who had been told his whole life that he was impressive and had simply believed it so completely that it had calcified into something that looked like confidence from a distance and felt like suffocation up close. He wore his white coat the way some men wear expensive suits, like armor, like a declaration. He had sandy brown hair going silver at the temples and very blue eyes that were almost pretty until you looked too long and noticed that they never actually warmed up, not even when he smiled. He was good at his job. Emma was willing to concede that. In the OR under pressure, with a chest cracked open and the clock running, he was genuinely skilled. But skill in a person like Carter Vale had become indistinguishable from ego. He believed that being right gave him permission to be cruel. And this hospital, for reasons that Emma had spent 18 months quietly observing and never quite understanding, had decided to let him. Bay 3 is already prepped, Emma said. She said it calmly, without attitude, simply as a factual statement. Vale turned and looked at her. It was a particular kind of look, the kind designed to make a person feel like they had spoken out of turn at a dinner table they had not been invited to attend. "Did I ask for your input, Nurse Reyes?" she said. "Right." He said it like he was filing her name in a folder he would never open again. "Nobody asked you. Bay 5, move the cart." "The patient is 4 minutes out," Emma said. "We don't have time to reposition. Bay 3 has everything she needs." "Bay 5, he said, "and I won't ask again." The room watched. That was the thing Emma had learned most thoroughly in her 18 months at Mercy General. The room always watched. It watched, and it waited, and it measured what happened next. It was a social ecosystem with its own rules about power and hierarchy. And right now, every person in that bay was watching to see whether Emma Reyes was going to push back or fold. She held his gaze for exactly 2 seconds. Then she began rolling the cart toward Bay 5. Not because she agreed with him, not because she was afraid of him, but because in 4 minutes a teenage girl with blunt force abdominal trauma and a dropping blood pressure was going to come through those doors. And the most important thing right now was not being right, it was being ready. She understood the difference. She was not sure Carter Vale did. The ambulance bay doors blew open at 8:21. The girl's name, the paramedics shouted as they rolled her in, was Kayla, 16 years old, hit by a car while crossing an intersection. The driver had fled the scene. She had been conscious at the scene but had lost responsiveness in transit. BP was 80/50 and falling. There was bruising spreading across her abdomen like a thundercloud. Vale took position at the head of the gurney. "Let's go. I want a full trauma panel. Type and cross, CT abdomen, stat. Who's on ultrasound?" "I am," Emma said. She was already reaching for the probe. "I didn't call your name. You need a fast exam right now, and I'm the fastest in this department." She said it the way she said everything, without heat, without apology, just fact. Something flickered across Vale's face. Not respect, not quite, but something that acknowledged briefly that she might be correct. "Fine, do it, and stay out of my way while you do." Emma positioned the ultrasound probe and began the exam. 4 views: perihepatic, parasplenic, pelvic, pericardial. Each one methodical, each one fast. In the background, she could hear Vale calling out orders, could hear the team responding, could hear the monitors screaming their urgent songs, but her hands were steady, and her eyes were focused, and her mind was doing what it always did in high-pressure situations. It went quiet. Not the quiet of being small, the quiet of being entirely, completely present. She found what she was looking for in the parasplenic view. "There's free fluid," she said. "A lot of it. She's bleeding internally, likely splenic laceration. She needs the OR, not CT." "I decide what she needs," Vale said. "She doesn't have time for CT," Emma said. She turned the screen slightly so he could see it. "Look." He looked. She watched his jaw tighten. She watched the moment where his professional judgment and his ego had a brief, silent argument. And his professional judgment, to his credit, won. "Call surgery," he said. "Tell them we're coming up." As the team began moving, Vale leaned close to Emma, not close enough for the others to hear, close enough for her to smell the starch in his coat. "Don't ever contradict me in front of my team again," he said quietly. Emma kept her eyes on the monitor. She would have died on the CT table. "That is not the point." She looked at him then, directly, steadily. "Then I'm not sure I understand what the point is." He held her gaze for a moment that stretched like a wire under tension. Then he walked away. The girl, Kayla, made it to the OR. The surgical team confirmed the splenic laceration. She was out of danger by 10 p.m. Emma heard this from Delia while she was updating charts at the nursing station. Delia said it the way experienced nurses say good news, briefly, like a small prayer acknowledged and filed away. There was no time to feel it fully. There never was. You registered it and you moved on. Emma moved on. At 10:45, she was drawing blood from a man in Bay 2 who had come in with chest pain that turned out to be anxiety and indigestion. A combination so common in this ER that the nurses had an unofficial nickname for it. When the doors opened again, this time it was different. She heard it before she saw it. The particular sound of a gurney moving fast, which is distinct from a gurney moving normally, has a different rhythm to it, an urgency transmitted through the wheels and through the voices of the people pushing it. She straightened up and looked toward the ambulance bay. 2 paramedics, military escort, 2 men in civilian clothes that fit them the specific way that tactical training fits a body, meaning it doesn't fit at all. It simply contains, barely. One of them was on the radio. The other had his hand on the shoulder of the man on the gurney, not comforting him exactly, more like maintaining contact, the way you keep a hand on something valuable. The man on the gurney was large, even horizontal, even bleeding, even with his face tight with the particular controlled expression of someone managing significant pain. He was unmistakably large. Not just physically, though that was part of it. Large the way a storm is large, the way certain presences simply take up more of a room than their physical dimensions should allow. He was maybe late 30s, dark-haired, with a jaw that looked like it had been set by someone who believed in infrastructure. There was a wound in his left side that the paramedics had packed with gauze that was currently losing the argument. "Gunshot wound," the lead paramedic called out. "Left lateral thorax, through and through. Possible pneumothorax, BP 100/60 and holding." He refused full sedation. "Who is this patient?" Vale demanded, materializing from somewhere. "Navy," one of the military men said. The single word landed in the room like a dropped steel bar. "I need a name for the chart." "You'll get what we can give you." The military man's voice was not hostile. It was simply the voice of someone communicating a boundary that was not negotiable. Vale's jaw set. "I run this trauma bay. I need a name, and I need a doctor who knows what he's doing," the man on the gurney said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel in a coffee can. The voice of someone who had spent years giving orders in loud environments. Even now bleeding, he managed to make it carry. "So let's both work on our disappointments together." A few people in the room made sounds they quickly converted into coughs. Emma kept her face still. She moved to the secondary position, checking the gurney inventory, reading the vitals on the portable monitor, doing the quiet work of assessment that nobody noticed until they needed it. She was reaching for a fresh gauge kit when Vale's hand came down on her shoulder. Not a tap, not a redirect, a shove. The same way you push a door that's in your way. "Move," he said. Not even the B word this time, just the single command, like she was furniture. Emma stumbled. Her hip caught the supply cart. The crash of instruments scattering across the floor was louder than she expected. She steadied herself on the cart's edge and stood up. She did not make a sound. The room had gone very quiet. From the gurney, the man's eyes had found her. They were dark eyes, dark brown, almost black, and they did not move with the unfocused quality of someone in significant pain. They moved with clarity, with precision, with a kind of attention that she recognized in the oldest, most instinctive part of her nervous system as something that sees rather than merely looks. He looked at her. He looked at where she had stumbled. He looked at Vale. "Hey," he said. Vale was already leaning over him, already lifting the gauze pack to assess the wound. "Hold still." "Hey," the man said again. The volume had not increased, but something in the quality of it had changed, the way barometric pressure changes before weather. Vale looked up. The man on the gurney said, "Take your hands off of her." The silence in the room became a different kind of silence, the kind that has weight. "Excuse me?" Vale said. "You heard me. Take your hands off her. And by that I mean, don't put them back on her, because what I just watched you do is not something that happens in front of me and gets ignored." He paused. The pause was deliberate. "Sir." The word "sir" in his mouth, delivered in that tone, was not a courtesy. It was a statement of exactly how much contempt could be packaged in a single syllable. Vale straightened up. His face had done something complicated. "I am the attending physician in this trauma bay, and you are a patient. Your opinion on how I manage my staff is not relevant." "I'm not giving an opinion," the man said. "I'm telling you what's going to happen and what isn't." He shifted slightly on the gurney, and even that small movement, even bleeding with a possible pneumothorax, carried the quality of someone choosing to be still rather than being unable to move. "She stays. You stay back. I will have you removed from—" "You will do nothing," the man said, "because you don't know who I am and you don't know who she is. And right now, one of those things matters a lot more than the other." He looked back at Emma, and then he said something that stopped every person in that room cold. "Death Star." It was quiet, just 2 words, but Emma went absolutely still. Death Star. She had not heard that name in 4 years, not since she had walked away from a different life, in a different version of herself, and had rebuilt something quieter, something smaller, something that didn't require her to be who she had been. Not since she had traded body armor for scrubs, and the particular weight of a different kind of responsibility. She looked at him, really looked, for the first time, past the vitals and the wound and the clinical assessment. She looked at his face, and then she recognized him. "Chief," she said. Her voice was completely level. Another person might have gasped. Another person might have said, "Oh my God, it's you." Emma Reyes said, "Chief," in the same tone she might say, "BP's stable," and she moved to the gurney without hesitation. "I knew you'd show up eventually," he said, and despite everything, despite the blood and the pain and the controlled chaos of the room around them, there was something in his voice that was almost warm. Almost. The way a knife blade picks up the light. "You always show up." Vale was looking between them with an expression that Emma might, in a different moment, have found satisfying. It was the expression of a man who had just realized that he was standing in a room where the coordinates had quietly shifted beneath his feet. "You know this nurse?" Vale said. The man on the gurney looked at him. "That," he said, "is the wrong question." "Then what's the right question?" The man was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The right question is whether she knows you. And based on what I just watched, she knows exactly who you are." He looked back at Emma. She just chose not to say it. Emma had already pulled on fresh gloves. She was assessing the wound, her hands moving with the particular efficiency that went beyond training and became something closer to fluency. The gauze pack was saturated. The bleeding had been partially controlled, but not fully. She could hear something in his breathing that confirmed the paramedic's concern. "I need a chest tray," she said. "Now." "I give the orders here," Vale said. But his voice had lost something, like a key that no longer quite fits the lock it was made for. Emma looked up. She looked at him with a kind of steadiness that had nothing behind it except absolute certainty. He has a developing pneumothorax. If we don't decompress in the next 8 minutes, we are going to lose him. You can argue about authority after that if you want to, but right now I need a chest tray. The room held its breath, and then Delia, from somewhere behind Vale, said, "Chest tray, Bay 4, let's go." That was the moment, not the shout, not the confrontation, just a charged nurse with reading glasses on her forehead making a decision, quietly, based on what she had been watching all night. It was a small thing. It had the weight of an avalanche. Vale said nothing. He stepped back one step. And Emma Reyes, who had been shoved into a supply cart 40 minutes ago, moved in. Her hands remembered. That was the thing about skills built in extreme conditions. They didn't rust. They waited. She worked with the focused, unhurried speed of someone who had done this before. In worse places, with less equipment, with considerably more at stake, though she would not say that out loud. She had never been someone who needed the room to understand her. The man on the gurney kept his eyes on her face. His breathing was controlled but deliberate. She could feel him managing his pain the way someone manages a difficult employee, through sheer force of determined attention. "You're going to feel pressure," she told him. "On 3. "I know what it's going to feel like," he said. "I know you do," she said. "I'm telling you anyway." Something that was almost a smile crossed his face. Almost. "You always were thorough." She counted to 3. She worked. The room watched. And somewhere in the back of Bay 4, Dr. Carter Vale stood with his arms crossed and watched a quiet nurse do something that he, in that moment, could not have done better. And the thing about men like Carter Vale is that they know it. They always know it. They just never learn how to live with the knowing. That was the thing about Emma Reyes. She had never needed him to live with it. She had only needed him to get out of the way. She had been getting out of people's way her whole life. She was done now. The chest tray arrived in 90 seconds. Emma knew because she counted. She always counted. Old habit. In certain environments, 90 seconds is the difference between a story and an obituary. And she had lived long enough in those environments that the counting had become as automatic as breathing. She worked without speaking. That was the other thing about her. The thing that people who didn't know her often mistook for coldness. She did not narrate her actions. She did not reassure out loud the way some nurses did. The running commentary of, "It's okay, you're doing great, just breathe for me." She believed that people in pain did not need words. They needed competence. And competence, real competence, the kind built in the dark in places most people never visit, does not announce itself. It simply moves. The man on the gurney, whose name she still had not said out loud, watched her hands with the attention of someone evaluating rather than being treated. His breathing had the controlled, deliberate quality of a man who had trained himself to manage pain the way a pilot manages turbulence. Not by pretending it wasn't there, by flying through it anyway. "Your technique changed," he said. "Left hand," she said, not looking up. "Stop tensing it." He relaxed his left hand. "I'm serious. You were always precise, but you moved faster then, more aggressive." "I adjusted," she said. "To what?" "To a world where I'm not trying to keep someone alive in the back of a vehicle going 60 miles an hour over unpaved road," she said. She said it without emotion. It was just a fact, a reference point, a coordinate on the map of who she used to be. "Hold still." He held still. Behind her, she was aware of Carter Vale in the way you are aware of a storm system moving on a radar screen. Present. Tracked. Not yet directly threatening, but not stable either. She could feel the pressure of his watching, the particular quality of attention from someone who has been displaced and has not yet decided what to do about it. She had been in rooms like that before. Different rooms, same pressure. She focused on the work. At 11:03 p.m., with the needle in, the lung beginning to re-expand, the monitors settling into rhythms that told a better story than they had 10 minutes ago, she allowed herself one slow breath. Just one. and then she kept moving. "What are your pain levels?" she said. "Manageable. That's not a number." "It's not a number kind of situation," he said. She looked at him then, really looked. "Chief, number." He met her eyes. Something passed between them that was not quite a conversation and not quite a memory. Something that people who have shared a specific category of experience carry in the space between their words. "6, he said. "Maybe 7. "I'm going to manage that," she said. "I've had worse." "I know you have." She was already reaching for the medication tray. "That's not the point." The point, though neither of them said it, was this: that she knew what 7 out of 10 felt like for a man like him. She knew what he was calibrating against. She knew what lived at the far end of his pain scale, and it was not the kind of thing that had a name in polite conversation. They both knew. And that shared knowledge, that common geography of difficult things survived, was its own kind of language. Vale chose that moment to speak. "I want a full account of the treatment decisions made in the last 15 minutes, he said. He was addressing the room generally, the way certain men address rooms when they want to reassert ownership of a space they feel they've lost. Documented and time-stamped. "Already being done," Emma said. She did not turn around. "I'm not talking to you, Reyes." "Then talk louder," Delia said from the station, "because she's the only one who can tell you what happened here." Another silence. Different quality from the earlier ones. This one had something almost like electricity in it. Vale walked to the station. Emma heard him lower his voice to talk to Delia, which meant he had calculated that open confrontation right now was not in his favor. She respected the calculation, even as she found the man making it contemptible. Tactical retreat was still tactical. It meant he was paying attention. She finished charting the vitals. She updated the medication log. She did everything by the book, methodically, completely, because she understood that in the coming hours, this documentation would matter. She had learned early in her nursing career, and earlier still in her previous one, that the most important battles are often fought on paper. "You're angry," the man on the gurney said quietly. She didn't answer immediately. She finished what she was writing. Then she said, "No." "Liar." "I'm focused," she said. "There's a difference. You always said that." "Because it's always been true." She capped the pen and looked at him directly. "How did you find me?" "I didn't," he said. "I got shot and they brought me to the closest trauma center. You were just here." A pause. "Funny how that works." "Hilarious," she said. He almost smiled again. That same almost smile she had seen when she was working on him, the one that existed in the corner of his mouth like a flag at half-mast. "Still no sense of humor." "Still bleeding," she returned. "So maybe focus." He did, but he kept watching her. And Emma, who was used to being unnoticed, who had spent 18 months carefully constructing a version of herself that people looked through rather than at, felt the specific discomfort of being seen by someone who actually knew what they were looking at. The ER continued its nighttime rhythm around them. A child with a fever in Bay 1. An elderly man with a possible stroke being fast-tracked to neurology. The steady percussion of a working trauma center at night, monitors and voices, and the soft hydraulic sound of automatic doors cycling. Life in its most unfiltered form. Emma had come to love it the way you love something complicated, not despite its difficulty, but because the difficulty was honest. At 11:19, one of the military men, the one who had kept his hand on the gurney during transport, appeared at the bay curtain. "How is he?" he said. It was not quite a question. "Stable," Emma said. "The pneumothorax is managed. The wound itself needs a surgical consult for full evaluation, but the immediate danger is controlled." The man nodded. He looked at the patient. Something passed between them, something wordless and quick, the kind of communication that happens between people who have operated together in confined, high-stakes environments. A full conversation conducted in a 2-second exchange of eye contact. "We've got a problem," the military man said. Define problem, the patient said. The people who did this, they tracked us to the city. The room temperature seemed to drop, though nothing physical had changed. Emma kept her face neutral. She kept working, but her attention, the part of her attention that lived in the oldest layer of her training, shifted, reallocated, like a security system quietly switching from passive monitoring to active. How close, the patient said. Close enough that we're not discussing it in an open bay. Emma looked at the military man. He looked back at her. He had clearly registered that she was not going to leave. She stays, the patient said, before anyone asked. Chief, she stays. No elaboration, no explanation. The tone was the explanation. The military man, whose name Emma still didn't have, considered this for approximately 3 seconds. Then he gave a small nod that communicated both acknowledgement and reservation. The nod of someone who disagrees but has chosen their battles. We had eyes on the crew from the extraction. They lost us for about 40 minutes. They don't have 40 minutes anymore. How many? The patient said. Last count, 4, maybe 5. Emma set down the chart. She looked at the patient. He was already looking at her. You need to be moved, she said. I know. Not to a regular room, somewhere that controls access. I know that too. Vale appeared at the bay entrance. He had clearly overheard some portion of the conversation, enough to make his face do the complicated thing it had been doing all night. The calculation of authority against reality. A math problem he kept finding himself on the wrong side of. What is going on in my trauma bay? The military man turned and looked at Vale with the specific expression of someone who has assessed a situation and reached a verdict in under 2 seconds. It was not a hostile expression. It was something closer to indifference, which in Emma's experience was considerably more unsettling. We need a secure room, the military man said. Private, single access point, ideally with a secondary exit. This is a hospital, Vale said, not a military installation. Then it's about to become one temporarily, the man said. I'd appreciate your cooperation. I am the attending physician, and I will not have this department. Dr. Vale, Emma's voice was quiet, completely quiet, the kind of quiet that, if you had spent enough time in enough dangerous situations, you had learned to pay attention to. She was not looking at him. She was still looking at the patient. There are armed individuals potentially moving toward this building who want to finish what they started tonight. I need you to either help us move this patient to a more defensible location, or I need you to step aside and let me do it. Vale stared at her. Defensible, he repeated. The words seemed to catch in his throat, like something foreign. That's what I said. The silence stretched. Then from the gurney, the patient said, She knows what she's talking about, doctor. I promise you that. Vale looked between them. Emma watched the moment where he tried to find a version of this situation where he was still in charge and simply could not locate it. It was not a long search. He was not a stupid man. He was a proud one, which is different. And pride, in rooms like this, was an expensive indulgence. He took 2 steps back. Emma moved. She unhooked the portable monitor with the efficiency of someone who had done it, or something like it, many times before. She signaled to Delia with a look, and Delia, who had been watching the entire exchange with the expression of someone filing a very detailed mental report, immediately moved to prep the transit medication kit. The military man, whose name she eventually learned was Garrett, took position at the left side of the gurney. Emma took the right. The patient, who she had still not named out loud in front of anyone who didn't already know, lay still and let them work. He was the kind of man who understood the difference between surrendering control and allocating it. They moved through the corridor at a pace that was fast without being a run. Emma's mind was running calculations in parallel, her nursing brain tracking vitals and medication schedules, her older brain tracking exits, sight lines, variables. The 2 modes of thinking existed in her simultaneously without conflict. They always had. She had sometimes wondered if that was strange. She had stopped wondering. They reached room 114, a private room at the end of a corridor with one primary entrance and a maintenance exit that most of the nursing staff used to avoid the long walk back to the break room. Emma had noticed it on her third day working here. She had noted it the way she noted exits everywhere, without fanfare, just filed away. She held the door. Garrett moved the gurney in. The patient shifted himself from gurney to bed with minimal assistance, the movement controlled and deliberate. A man's body doing what he asked it to do, even when it had reasons not to. Emma reconnected the monitor leads with practiced speed. She checked the IV line. She checked the wound dressing. She checked his eyes. "Still a 6, she said. "Still a 6, he said. "Your jaw says 7. "My jaw has always been dramatic," he said. She reached for the medication kit. "I'm going to take you to a 4. "Don't take me lower than 5, he said. "I need to stay sharp." She considered this. In a hospital with a patient who had just had a needle in his chest and a gunshot wound in his side, the clinical answer was different from the practical one. She understood the practical one. "Fine," she said. 5. She administered the medication. She watched his face as the edge came down. Just a fraction. Not gone, just managed. The pain moved from the foreground to somewhere more workable. He exhaled once, slowly, through his nose. "Thank you," he said. Emma nodded. She did not say, "You're welcome." She was already checking the door. Garrett was on the phone in the corner, his voice low and clipped, communicating in the shorthand of people who have trained together. Emma caught fragments. Position, perimeter, ground floor. She was building a picture from the pieces, and the picture was not comfortable. "How long have you known they were tracking you?" she said. "Since about 40 minutes before they shot me," the patient said. "And you didn't extract." "I had a job to finish." "The job nearly finished you," she said. "Story of my career." She turned and looked at him fully. In the quieter light of the private room, away from the fluorescent intensity of the trauma bay, he looked different, not smaller, never smaller, but more human. The lines around his eyes were deeper than she remembered. There was a scar along his left jawline that hadn't been there 4 years ago. He had the look of a man who had continued living his particular kind of life after she had stopped sharing it, and the evidence of that continuation was written on him the way years are always written on people who don't live carefully. "What was the job?" she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "You know I can't tell you that." "I know," she said. "I asked anyway." "Old habit." "Yes," she said. She pulled the chair from the corner and sat down. Not because she was tired, because sitting meant she was staying, and staying meant something specific. "Tell me something you can tell me." He was quiet for a moment. The monitor beeped its steady rhythm. Garrett finished his call and stood facing the door, his back to the room, which was its own kind of answer about the situation developing outside it. "Your name came up," the patient said finally. Emma's eyes moved to his face. "When?" "About 8 months ago, during a debrief. Someone mentioned that Death Star had gone quiet, gone civilian." He paused. There was some discussion about what that meant. "And what did it mean?" she said. "Depends who you asked." He shifted against the pillow. "Some people thought it meant you'd broken. The pressure, the things you saw. They figured you'd found the exit and taken it." "And you," she said. He looked at her. "I've seen you work under conditions that would break most men I know," he said. "I don't believe in your version of broken." The quiet between them was different now, warmer, more complicated. "I didn't break," she said. "I know." "I chose," she said. "There's a difference." "There is," he agreed, "and it took me longer than it should have to understand that." Emma filed that away. Not for now, for later, or for never, depending on how the next few hours went. She stood up and moved to the window. "Garrett," she said. The man at the door turned slightly. How many people does your team have in this building right now? She said. 2 inside, 2 establishing perimeter outside. That's not enough, she said. No, he agreed. It's not. Can you get more? Working on it. 45 minutes minimum for additional personnel. Emma turned this over. 45 minutes. The math of that, laid against what she knew about how these situations escalated, was not encouraging. She thought about the layout of the building, the corridor they had moved through, the maintenance exit, the distance between this room and the trauma bay where they had been 20 minutes ago. She thought about Dr. Carter Vale standing somewhere in this building, angry and displaced and entirely unaware that the night had become something different from anything his life had prepared him for. She thought about the 16-year-old girl named Kayla, currently in post-op, alive because someone had not moved out of the way when told to. She thought about all the other people in this building, the patients and the nurses and the orderlies and the cleaning staff, none of whom had signed up for this, and all of whom were now, whether they knew it or not, inside the perimeter of something that was moving toward them. Then we work with what we have, she said. She turned from the window and looked at both of them. Garrett and the patient and Garrett. 2 men who trusted her, one because he had watched her earn it, and one because someone he trusted had told him to. I need you to tell me everything you know about how they operate, entry points, team size, how they handle variables. Emma, the patient said. She looked at him. You're not in that world anymore, he said. He said it gently, which surprised her. She had not expected gentle from him. I know, she said, but this building has 412 patients in it right now, she said, and 17 nurses on shift, and 6 doctors, including one who spends most of his energy asserting authority he doesn't deserve. She held his gaze. The world I'm in now is the one that matters, and it just got complicated. The patient looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Garrett and said, "Tell her everything." Garrett turned from the door. He pulled the chair from the other corner of the room and sat down. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees in the posture of someone about to deliver information efficiently. And that was when the lights in the corridor went out. Not all the lights. The hospital's emergency systems kicked in within 2 seconds, the backup generators coming online with a low hum that Emma felt in her sternum more than she heard. But the specific lights in the specific corridor outside room 114 were dark. Emma was already on her feet. Garrett was already at the door. The patient was already reaching, despite everything, despite the wound in his side and the medication in his blood, and the fact that he had been horizontal for the last 40 minutes, for something that should not have been within reach and was anyway. Because men like him do not enter unfamiliar environments without solving for contingencies. Emma looked at the door. She looked at the window. She looked at the maintenance exit in the back of the room. Her hand was steady. Her mind was quiet. That specific quiet, the one that was not small. Okay, she said, to no one, to all of them, to herself. She had been out of this world for 4 years. It turned out 4 years was not very long at all. The darkness in the corridor lasted 4 seconds before the emergency strips kicked in along the baseboards, throwing a low, amber glow across the floor that was enough to move by, but not enough to see faces clearly. Emma counted those 4 seconds the way she counted everything, automatically, without deciding to. 4 seconds of darkness in a hospital corridor at 11:41 p.m. was not an accident. She was at the maintenance door in the back of the room before Garrett finished his first sentence. She pressed her palm flat against the surface of it, feeling for vibration. Nothing. She pressed her ear close without touching. The sounds on the other side were the ordinary sounds of a hospital's mechanical systems, pipes and ventilation, and the distant hum of equipment that never slept. Nothing that didn't belong. Not yet. How did they cut the corridor lights without triggering the full emergency system, she said. Garrett's voice came from near the main door. They knew the building's electrical layout, which means they've had eyes on this facility. For how long is what I need to know, the patient said from the bed. His voice was steady. The medication had taken the edge off, but had not touched the sharpness of him. The focused alertness that was, Emma suspected, simply the baseline of who he was. Long enough to map it, Garrett said. That's a minimum 2-day prep job. Emma turned this over. 2 days. While the man on the bed had been running his operation, whatever it was, someone had been running a parallel one. Watching, measuring, planning. It was the kind of patience that made her stomach tighten, because patience, in people who wanted to do harm, was far more dangerous than anger. "You're 2 people inside," she said to Garrett. "Where are they positioned?" "North stairwell and main lobby." "Neither of those positions covers this corridor." "No," he said. "Then we have a gap." She said it without accusation. It was just the map of the situation, laid flat. How long to reposition one of them? 2 minutes, maybe 3. Then do it, now. There was a half-second where Garrett looked at her, the same kind of assessment she had felt from him since the beginning. A man measuring a variable he hadn't fully solved for yet. Then he got on his radio, low and quick. Emma moved back to the patient. She checked the IV line out of habit. She checked the monitor. She checked his face. "If this room becomes compromised, you cannot move quickly," she said. "Your lung is still recalibrating. Any significant exertion in the next hour risks recollapse." "I'm aware," he said. "I need you to actually be aware," she said. "Not just say it." He looked at her. "Emma." "Chief, I have operated on a collapsed lung before," he said. "Twice. And I've treated people who did that," she returned. "I know exactly what it costs. That's why I'm telling you." She held his gaze. "You are the asset in this room, not the operator. Let me be the operator." The word asset came out of her mouth with no self-consciousness, because it was accurate, because they both spoke this language, because in the geometry of the situation, that was exactly what he was, the person that everything else was organized around protecting. He knew it. She knew it. The only question was whether he would accept it. He was quiet for a moment. She watched him run the calculation. "Fine," he said. "Fine," she repeated. "Don't make me regret it." "I never have," she said, and she went to the door. Garrett had finished his repositioning call. He looked at her as she approached. "My guy will be in position on this corridor in 90 seconds. "Good." She looked at the door frame, at the gap at the bottom, at the handle, which was a standard hospital lever style, no lock beyond the basic interior press button. "This door needs to be barricaded." "With what?" Garrett said. Emma looked around the room with the specific quality of attention that does not see furniture and equipment, but sees mass, density, and angle. The bed was motorized, heavy, anchored to the floor mount. The 2 chairs were lightweight, useless. The IV stand was aluminum, narrow. The medical cabinet in the corner was bolted to the wall. The crash cart, which Delia had sent with them, and which was currently parked to the left of the bed, was metal, on wheels, loaded with equipment that collectively weighed somewhere around 200 pounds. "The crash cart," she said, wedged at the base of the door with the wheel locks engaged. She was already moving toward it. "Help me angle it." Garrett moved to the other side. Together they positioned it, and she engaged all 4 wheel locks with the heel of her shoe, hard enough to seat them fully. The cart would not stop a determined breach, but it would slow one. And in situations like this, seconds purchased were seconds earned. The patient watched from the bed. He said nothing. She could feel him watching, and she understood what was in it, because she had felt a version of it herself years ago. Watching other people run the play while you manage the hard discipline of being still. At 11:47, Garrett's radio crackled. One word, fast and flat. "Contact." Emma looked at Garrett. "Where?" He pressed the radio. "North end of the corridor. 2 individuals. Moving slow. Checking doors." Moving slow and checking doors. That was a sweep pattern, not a direct assault. It meant they were searching rather than executing, which meant they hadn't confirmed the room yet. That was information. Information was runway. They don't know which room, she said. Not yet, Garrett said. How long before they reach this end of the corridor? 4 minutes, maybe 5 if they're being thorough. Emma turned back to the room. 4 minutes. She ran the math with the parts of herself that had done this kind of math before. 1 corridor entry, 1 maintenance exit, 2 trained individuals in the room, one of them compromised. Garrett, who was capable, but whose first obligation was the patient, not the room, and herself. Herself, who had been a nurse for 18 months and a different thing for 6 years before that. She went to the IV stand. She removed the saline bag and set it carefully on the cabinet. The stand itself was aluminum, approximately 5 feet tall, a single vertical pole on a weighted base with a crossbar hook at the top. She held it in her right hand and felt the weight distribute. It was not what she would have chosen. It was what she had. She set it against the wall within reach. "You're going to use that," the patient said. It was not a question. "If I need to," she said. Emma, his voice had shifted, something in it that was different from the command tone and different from the almost warmth. Something more direct. "There are 2 of them." "I know how to count," she said. "I'm not questioning your math." He paused. "I'm telling you it's not nothing." "I know it's not nothing," she looked at him, "but it's also not the worst thing I've handled." He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "No, it's not." And that acknowledgement, from him, in that room, in that moment, was worth more than anything Carter Vale had failed to offer in 18 months of shared shifts. The radio crackled again. They split, one continuing the sweep, one doubling back. Emma's internal map of the situation reorganized instantly. Split meant coordination. It meant communication between them. It meant that when one of them found something, the other would know within seconds. "Your man in the corridor," she said to Garrett, "can he intercept the one doubling back without engaging the sweep?" Garrett considered this. Risky. Everything in the next 10 minutes is risky. Which risk do we manage? He made the call. She listened to him give the instruction. She thought about Delia back in the main ER, about the patients in the bays, about the nurses on shift who were going about a Tuesday night that had no idea what was happening in Corridor 4 of the East Wing. She thought about Kayla in post-op, sleeping off anesthesia with her spleen gone and her life intact. She had worked very hard for 18 months to build something ordinary, something good in the way that quiet things are good, something that did not cost the way her previous life had cost. She did not resent this moment for threatening it. She understood that certain things, once you have been shaped by them, simply wait for the occasion to become relevant again. You do not get to leave that part of yourself behind. You carry it, and when the moment arrives, you are grateful, in the most complicated possible way, that you did. The door handle moved, not dramatically, not violently, just the small, almost gentle movement of someone testing a handle in the dark to see if it would give. It lasted 1 second, then it stopped. Emma was already positioned to the left of the door, back against the wall, the IV stand in her right hand, her breathing controlled, her mind perfectly still. Garrett was on the opposite side, his hand on the doorframe, his body angled. He had something in his right hand that she didn't ask about. From the bed, the patient was absolutely silent. He had understood his assignment, and he was doing it with the discipline of someone who had spent years learning which battles were his to fight and which ones required the harder courage of trusting someone else to fight them. The handle moved again, this time with more pressure. The crash cart shifted 1/2 inch against the door and held. A pause. 3 seconds. 4. Then from the other side of the door, a voice, low, measured. With an accent she placed as Eastern European, specifically the flattened consonants of a particular region. "We know he's in this building. Make it easy. Send him out. Nobody else needs to be involved." Emma said nothing. Garrett said nothing. The patient said nothing. "There's a nurse in there," the voice continued. "We have no issue with medical personnel. This is not about the hospital." Emma almost found something darkly ironic in that. "We have no issue with medical personnel," as if she were still only that. "Last chance," the voice said. Garrett looked at Emma. She gave a small, single nod. He fired. Not with a weapon. He hit the door with his shoulder, hard and fast, and the crash cart rocked forward against the doorframe, and the crash of metal against metal was enormous in the small room. And then there was the sound of someone on the other side going down, and Emma was already moving, already through the gap, because the half-second of chaos after an unexpected impact is the most valuable half-second in any physical confrontation. And she had been trained by people who built their entire operational philosophy around that half-second. The man in the corridor was large, trained, faster than the fall suggested, already recovering when she reached him. She did not give him the time to finish recovering. The IV stand came down in a controlled arc, not wild, not desperate, the way a skilled musician strikes a note, which is with precisely the right force, in precisely the right place. He went back down. She stepped over him and looked both directions in the amber-lit corridor. The second man was at the far end. He had heard the impact and had stopped. He was looking at her. She was looking at him. There was a distance of approximately 30 feet between them, and an absolute silence that lasted somewhere between 1 second and forever. "Hey," Garrett's voice, from behind her, steady. His radio was in his hand. "My guy has the other one, north end." The man at the far end of the corridor made a calculation. Emma watched him make it. She watched the moment he decided what it cost and what it was worth. He took 2 steps backward. Then he turned and moved fast toward the north exit, where she knew Garrett's man was waiting. Emma stood in the corridor and breathed. The amber lights hummed. The hospital's mechanical systems continued their indifferent background work. Somewhere above her, on the second floor, she could hear the distant sound of a nurse call bell cycling. Life, continuing. The ordinary machinery of a Tuesday night. She looked down at the man on the floor. He was conscious, dazed, but conscious. She assessed him the way she assessed everything, clinically, automatically. No immediately life-threatening injury. She would need to document this. She would need to call the police. There was a process for this, a chain of necessary steps, and she began organizing them in her mind, even as she stood in a hospital corridor, holding a dented IV stand at 11:53 p.m. She went back into the room. The patient was sitting up in the bed. He had moved, she could tell by the position of the monitor leads, but he had stayed in the bed, which was the agreement, and she acknowledged that in the small, private accounting, she kept of things that mattered. "Done," she said. "How?" he said. "IV stand." A pause. "Of course," he said. Garrett was already on the radio, calling in the situation, giving coordinates and status in the compact, efficient language of someone who had done this many times. Emma set the IV stand against the wall. She looked at her hands. They were steady. They had been steady the whole time. She was not surprised by this. She just noted it, the way she noted the things about herself that were no longer entirely hers, that belonged also to the years and the training and the experiences that had formed them. She went to the patient and began checking his dressings. The exertion of sitting up had been minimal, but she checked anyway. The wound was holding. The monitor was steady. She adjusted the IV flow rate and made a note in the portable chart. "You're going to write this up as a medical incident," he said. "I'm going to write it up accurately," she said. "That's not the same thing." "I know." She kept her eyes on the chart. "I'll figure out the language." He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "You saved my team 2 years ago." She looked up. "The op in the valley," he said. "The one where we took those casualties and had to hold position for 6 hours before extraction. You were our forward medical support." He held her gaze. 3 men are alive right now because of what you did in those 6 hours. Emma said nothing. I never told you that, he said. Not in those words. You didn't need to, she said. I needed to, he said. I just didn't. And then you were gone. He shifted slightly against the pillow. You went quiet, and I let it go because I thought you needed space, and because I was not very good at that kind of thing, and because... He stopped, started again. Because it was easier to tell myself you were fine than to find out. The room held this admission like a cupped hand holds water. Carefully, imperfectly. I was fine, she said. I know that now, he said. I didn't know it then. The door opened. Garrett came back in. He looked at both of them with the expression of a man who has walked into the middle of something and has chosen, professionally, not to have noticed. Police are 3 minutes out. My people have both subjects secured. The second approach team did not make entry. Second approach team, Emma said. 2 individuals who made it to the east parking structure. They turned around when they lost contact with the first pair. He looked at her specifically. They'll regroup. Tonight's window is probably closed, but this isn't over. No, Emma said. It's not. She went to the window, not to look out, just to think. She had a habit of turning her back on rooms when she needed to think clearly, as if the removal of faces helped her access a different part of her processing. She stood there for 20 seconds. Then she turned back. He needs to be transferred to a secure facility, she said to Garrett. Not another hospital, somewhere with actual physical security. The people who came tonight know this building. They know the layout, the shift schedules, the access points. Whatever advantage we had in the last hour is gone. Garrett nodded. I've already put in the request. We're waiting on authorization. How long? Could be 2 hours, could be less. In 2 hours, she said, anyone who wants to try again has had time to regroup and bring more people. Yes, Garrett said. Then the 2 hours is the problem we're solving, she said. She turned to the patient. He was watching her with an expression she recognized, not just from their shared history, from the mirror on the days when she had been the one in the impossible position and someone else had been the one figuring out the math. It was the expression of someone who had finally, fully, handed over control, not because they had surrendered, because they had found someone worth trusting with it. I need more people in this building, she said, and I need to not be the only person here who knows what's happening. What are you thinking? Garrett said. She thought about Delia, with her reading glasses and her 18 years of night shifts and her quiet, unbreakable competence. She thought about the security staff, underpaid and undertrained for this, but present. She thought about the 2 nurses in the East Wing who had both, in her assessment, the kind of calm under pressure that suggested more history than their paperwork showed. She thought about all the ordinary people in this building doing ordinary jobs who had, simply by being here tonight, become part of something that required more of them. And she thought briefly about Carter Vale, standing somewhere in this hospital with his expensive coat and his diminished authority, shaken in a way he didn't fully understand yet. She thought about what it would cost her to ask him for something, what it would cost him to give it. She picked up the portable phone on the wall. She dialed the nursing station. Delia answered on the second ring. It's Emma, she said. I need you to do something for me, and I need you to not ask questions until I can explain properly. A pause. Then Delia said, Honey, I have been watching you work for 18 months. At this point, you could ask me to set fire to the supply closet, and I'd want to hear the reasoning first. A beat. What do you need? Emma closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Something that was not quite gratitude, but lived in the same neighborhood, moved through her and was filed away for later. I need you to quietly move every non-critical patient on the East Wing into the central corridor bays, she said. I need it done without creating panic. Tell them it's a routine overnight shuffle, electrical maintenance, whatever works. And I need you to find out where Vale is right now. Vale, Delia repeated. Why do you need Vale? Because, Emma said, this is his hospital, and the next hour is going to require everyone in it. Another pause. When Delia spoke again, her voice had the quality of someone who has just recalibrated their entire understanding of a night they thought they knew. Give me 10 minutes, she said. You have 7, Emma said. She hung up. The patient was watching her from the bed. His face had the expression of someone watching a familiar thing happen from a new angle. Death Star, he said quietly. She looked at him. Welcome back, he said. She picked up the IV stand from against the wall. She checked the door. She checked the maintenance exit. She checked him, clinically, efficiently, the way she checked everything. I never left, she said. I was just waiting for a reason. Delia called back in 6 minutes and 14 seconds. Emma knew because she had been watching the clock on the wall with the part of her brain that never entirely stopped counting. Vale is in the physician's lounge on the 2nd floor, Delia said. He's been there for the last 20 minutes. Somebody told me he poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down like a man who's been personally insulted by the entire concept of Tuesday. A pause. I've started the patient shuffle, told them it's a precautionary electrical issue. Nobody's panicking. Mrs. Hernandez in 112 asked if she could use the good waiting room chairs, and I told her, yes. Good, Emma said. Keep it calm. Don't move anyone who can't be moved safely. I know how to move patients, Emma. I know you do. She meant it. One more thing. The 2 nurses in the East Wing, the overnight pair, Jameson and Park. What do you know about them? A beat of silence. Jameson did 2 years as a combat medic before nursing school. Park, I don't know the details, but she has that look. You know the one. The look of someone who's been through something and decided not to talk about it. Emma knew the look. She lived in it. Keep them close. Don't explain yet. Just keep them in the loop and tell them to stay sharp. Sharp, Delia repeated. Right. Another pause that carried more weight than a pause technically should. Emma, how bad is this? Emma looked at the patient. He was watching her. His eyes had the quality of someone waiting to see what she would say, not because he didn't know, but because the answer she gave would tell him something about how she was handling it. It's manageable, Emma said. That's the same thing you said about Mrs. Patterson's blood pressure before she coded. Mrs. Patterson was fine, Emma said. Eventually, Delia said, keep the East Wing clear. I'll call you in 10 minutes. She hung up. The patient said, you're going to go get Vale? Yes, she said. You don't need Vale, he said. You've handled worse without administrative backup. This isn't about backup, she said. She picked up the portable chart and made 3 quick notations. Not because they were urgent, but because she needed the documentation current before she left the room. This is his hospital. When the police arrive, when the transfer authorization comes through, when there are questions about what happened in this building tonight, I need someone with institutional authority on the right side of the story. Otherwise, a nurse who incapacitated 2 armed men in a corridor becomes a liability instead of a hero. The patient was quiet for a moment. Then he said, you've thought about this. I think about everything, she said. I know. He said it simply, without irony. That's why you're still alive. She gave Garrett the specific instructions she needed him to follow while she was gone. Coverage of the room, response protocol if the radio signaled another approach, how to reach her if the situation changed faster than expected. Garrett listened without interrupting, which she appreciated. He was a man who understood the efficiency of receiving information completely before responding to it. Back in 15 minutes, she said. What if Vale doesn't cooperate? Garrett said. Emma was already at the door. Then I'll be back in 5, she said, and she went into the corridor. The amber emergency lighting was still running. The main corridor lights had been restored to about 70%, enough to work by, not quite enough to feel entirely normal. She passed the man she had put down earlier, who was now zip-tied and conscious, and sitting against the wall, with a security guard standing over him, who looked like he had recently been informed that his Tuesday night was not what he had expected it to be. She nodded at the guard. He stared at her. She kept walking. The second floor felt like a different country, quieter. The sounds from below filtered up, dampened, and rearranged. The specific acoustics of a building layered over itself. She pushed through the stairwell door and moved toward the physician's lounge at the end of the hall, the place where the doctors retreated when they needed to be somewhere that felt insulated from the machinery they ran. She opened the door without knocking. Carter Vale was sitting in the chair nearest the window with a mug of coffee and the expression of a man in the middle of a private and fairly bitter internal argument. He looked up when she came in. Something moved across his face, several things actually, in quick succession. Surprise, irritation, and something underneath those two that she noted and filed away because it was the first genuinely honest thing she had seen on his face all night. It looked almost like relief. He covered it immediately. "Reyes, what in the hell is going on in this hospital?" "I'll explain everything," she said, "but I need you to come with me first. I'm not going anywhere until someone tells me why there are police cars pulling into the parking lot and why my charge nurse is shuffling patients at midnight like she's rearranging furniture. Both of those things are connected," she said, "and I will explain them. But you need to hear it in the room where the situation is, not up here." He stood up. He was still in the white coat. He had not taken it off. She understood the psychology of that without needing it explained. Some people took their armor off when they sat down. Carter Vale had clearly not been sitting down so much as holding a position. "You have 30 seconds to give me the version that convinces me this is not a complete breakdown of protocol," he said. Emma looked at him. She thought about 18 months of small cruelties, of being shoved and dismissed and spoken over, of being told to move and stay out of the way, and that nobody had asked her. She thought about the supply cart and the scattered syringes and the floor of Bay 4. She thought about the girl in post-op and the man in room 114 and the two men in the corridor and the ones who had retreated to regroup. She thought about what it cost her to need anything from this man. And then she thought about the 412 patients in this building and the 17 nurses on shift, and the cost became irrelevant. "There is a Navy SEAL in room 114 who was shot tonight by a team of professional operators who have now made 2 attempts on this building," she said. "Both attempts have been contained. A third attempt is likely before his transfer to a secure facility, which is authorized but not yet executed. I have 1 trained military escort in the room, 2 additional personnel in the building, and approximately 90 minutes of vulnerability window before the situation is resolved." She held his gaze. "I need you because when the police walk into this hospital in the next 10 minutes, they need to talk to someone with actual authority, and right now that person is you." Vale stared at her. The 30 seconds came and went. 2 attempts, he said. "Yes." "You contained them." "Yes." "How?" "An IV stand and a shoulder," she said. Something happened in his face that she had never seen there before. It was not admiration exactly. It was the look of a man confronting information that does not fit the category he had assigned it to, and experiencing the specific discomfort of having to expand the category. "Come with me," she said. "Now." He came. The walk back to the ground floor was fast and mostly silent. Vale fell into step beside her with the stride of a man who moved through hospitals the way he moved through everything, like the space was already his. But the quality of his silence was different from what she was used to. He was not constructing a position. He was listening, absorbing. She could almost hear the recalibration. They reached room 114 at 12:04 a.m. Garrett looked at Vale when they came through the door, with the expression of someone assessing a new variable and not yet having reached a verdict. The patient looked at Vale with no particular expression at all, which was its own kind of verdict. Vale looked at the patient. He looked at the monitor, the wound dressing, the IV line. His professional eye ran the assessment automatically, the way breathing is automatic. And whatever conclusion it reached, he did not share it immediately. "Doctor," the patient said. His tone was not warm, it was not hostile. It was the tone of someone who has made a decision to be functional. "You're the Navy SEAL," Vale said. It was almost not a question. "Among other things," the patient said. Vale turned to Emma. "You treated a gunshot wound, managed a pneumothorax, performed a corridor security action, and coordinated a patient shuffle without notifying the attending physician." "The attending physician was unavailable," Emma said. "I was 20 feet away," Vale said. "You were in the lounge," she said, "with your coffee." She said it without heat, without satisfaction, just accurate. "And before that, you were in a trauma bay telling me to move while I was trying to save his life." The room held its breath. Vale's jaw tightened. She watched the argument inside him, the one between the man who needed to be right and the man who was standing in a room where right had a different shape than he was used to. "The police," he said finally. "What do they know?" "Currently, very little," Garrett said. "They responded to a security call. They have 2 individuals in custody on the ground floor. They're going to want to talk to someone in the next 20 minutes. "I'll talk to them," Vale said. He said it with the particular finality of someone making a decision that cost them something. Emma noted it. She would not thank him for it. Not yet, but she noted it. His radio crackled. Not his radio, Garrett's. "Movement in the east parking structure," Garrett's contact said. "Multiple vehicles, counting 4, possibly 5 individuals. They're suiting up." The room shifted. "Third wave," Garrett said. "Earlier than expected," Emma said. "They regroup faster," Garrett said, "which means they're better resourced than we assessed." Vale said, "How far is the east parking structure from this room?" 3 minutes at a walking pace," Emma said. 90 seconds at a run. "And the police outside. 2 patrol units in the front lot," Garrett said. "Not positioned for east entry." Vale looked at Emma. It was a different look from anything that had come before it. Not the dismissal, and not the irritation, and not the complicated recalibration. It was the look of a man who has run out of things to assert and has arrived, finally, at the actual question. "What do we do?" Emma was already moving. "Garrett, get on the radio to the police units. They need to reposition to cover east entry now. Tell them we have confirmed hostiles approaching." She looked at Vale. "You need to get hospital security to lock down every east wing entry point. Badge access only. Every door." "We don't have that kind of lockdown protocol built in," Vale said. "Then improvise," she said. "You're a trauma surgeon. Improvising under pressure is your entire job." He pulled out his phone and started dialing. She watched his hands. They were steady. She noted this the way she noted things about her patients. Without judgment, just information. Carter Vale, under real pressure, stripped of the performance, was a steadier man than Carter Vale in his natural habitat. She found this genuinely interesting and filed it away. She went to the patient. "Third approach," she said. 5 individuals. East parking structure, 90 seconds out at speed. "I heard," he said. He was sitting up fully now. He had the look of a man who had made a decision about his own limitations and had decided to renegotiate them. "I'm not staying in this bed if they breach the corridor." "You are," she said. "Emma, your lung is not a debate," she said. "I need you functional for the transfer. If you recollapse in the next 20 minutes trying to play offense, the transfer becomes an emergency airlift, and we lose every advantage we have left." She put her hand on his arm, not the clinical touch of assessment, something more direct. "I need you to trust me." He looked at her hand. He looked at her face. "You always asked for that," he said quietly. "Back then, when I was being difficult." "You were often difficult," she said. "You never stopped asking anyway." "I'm still not stopping," she said. Something passed over his face. Not the almost smile this time, something fuller, complicated and real and not designed for anyone's consumption. He put his free hand over hers briefly. 1 second. Then he took it away. "I'll stay in the bed," he said, "but the maintenance exit stays unlocked." "Agreed," she said. She went to Garrett. He had finished the radio call. "Police are repositioning. 1 unit moving to East Entry now." "1 unit is 2 officers," she said, "against 5 armed and prepped individuals." "I know the math," he said. "Then tell them to hold position and contain, not engage," she said. "Their job is to slow the approach. Ours is to hold this room until backup arrives." "Backup is 35 minutes out." Emma looked at the door. She looked at the patient. She looked at Vale, who had finished his call and was standing in the middle of the room with the expression of a man who has just realized that his authority, the thing he had spent years building and defending, was, in this moment, the least interesting thing about him. "Then we hold for 35 minutes, she said. The first sound came 4 minutes later. Not an explosion, not gunfire. The specific sound of a door at the end of a corridor being opened with force. The way doors sound when someone goes through them who is not asking permission. 1 crash. Then voices, low, coordinated. The specific cadence of people moving as a unit with a shared objective. The police radio on Garrett's hip crackled with controlled urgency. "East Entry breached, 1 subject down, moving to secondary position." "They got 1, Garrett said. 4 left, Emma said. Vale said, "Should we be moving him?" He looked at the patient. His voice was steady, but she could hear the thing underneath it. Not fear, exactly. The presence of someone encountering a level of reality that their previous experience had not prepared them for. "Moving him into an unsecured corridor with 4 armed individuals in the building is worse than holding," Emma said. "We stay. We hold the room." She positioned herself at the main door. She gave Garrett the maintenance exit. She handed Vale the crash cart from the wall, not as a weapon but as a barrier, and told him to position it the same way she had done it an hour ago. He did it without arguing, which told her more about how much the night had changed him than anything he could have said. The sounds in the corridor moved closer. 2 sets of footsteps, she thought. The team had split again. She had expected that. People who plan well split their assets. It reduces single-point vulnerability and doubles coverage. It also meant that somewhere in this building, 2 more of them were heading somewhere she wasn't. "Garrett," she said quietly. "Heard it," he said. He was already on the radio. 2 on the east corridor moving toward us. 2 others unknown position, requesting location on the building cameras. A pause. Then from the radio, camera feeds showed 2 individuals at the north stairwell. 2nd floor. 2nd floor. The physician's lounge. The nursing station. The places where the people who were not in this room were. Emma looked at Vale. She watched him process the same information she had just processed. Watched his face move through the geography of it. 2nd floor, the nurses, Delia, the people he had worked alongside for however many years he had worked here. "Delia," he said. "Just the name." "Call her," Emma said. "Right now. Tell her to get everyone into the central medication room on the 2nd floor. It's the only room up there with a reinforced lock. She'll understand lockdown procedures." Vale already had his phone out. He dialed. He turned slightly away from the room, not for privacy, but because that is what people do when they are about to say something urgent to someone they actually care about. They create a small acoustic space for it. Emma heard him say, "Delia, listen to me. I need you to do exactly what I say, and I need you to do it right now." She turned back to the door. The footsteps in the corridor had stopped. That was, in certain ways, worse than when they were moving. Moving people had trajectories you could predict. Still, people were making decisions you couldn't see. She looked at the patient. He was watching the door with the focused stillness of someone who has accepted the parameters of their situation and is operating within them with everything they have. His left hand was gripping the bed rail, not from fear, from the discipline of not moving when you have decided not to move. "You okay?" she said. Ask me in 30 minutes, he said. I will, she said, and she meant it. The door handle moved. Unlike the first time, it did not move gently. It moved with the decisive pressure of someone who was not testing, but committing. The crash cart held. The door bowed slightly at the frame and held. One impact. Two. The sound of metal absorbing force and giving back nothing. Then silence. Emma said quietly, "They know we blocked it." "Which means they go to the maintenance exit," Garrett said. "Which means they split again," she said. She looked at him. The maintenance exit was in the back of the room. If they came through it and came through the main door simultaneously, there were two of them and two entry points, and that was an equation that was solvable but not comfortable. Then the radio on Garrett's hip spoke. It was not Garrett's contact. It was a different voice, female, professional, with the clipped authority of someone giving orders rather than reporting. "All units, this is Special Agent Torres, FBI. We have the building. Stand down on East Corridor. Repeat, stand down. We are making entry." The silence that followed was the kind that has color in it. Warm, almost gold. Garrett looked at Emma. His face had done something that she suspected did not happen on it very often. Something that looked like genuine relief. From the bed, the patient let out one slow breath through his nose. He released the bed rail. He looked at Emma. "FBI," he said. "FBI," she confirmed. "You called them," he said. "At some point in the last 2 hours, you called the FBI." "Garrett called them," she said. "On whose instruction?" he said. She said nothing. She was already moving to the maintenance door to secure it from the inside until the all clear came. "Emma," he said. She looked back at him. "When did you call them?" he said. "The actual timeline." "About 8 minutes after you told me what was happening," she said, while Garrett was repositioning his man in the corridor. He stared at her. "You were treating my wound and coordinating a federal response at the same time." "You were in pain," she said. "The pain management took priority. Everything else ran parallel." Vale, from the corner, said nothing. He was standing very still with his phone in his hand, and he had the specific expression of a man who has spent the last several hours watching someone he fundamentally misunderstood demonstrate, repeatedly and without apparent effort, exactly who they were. It was not a comfortable expression. It was, she thought, an honest one. Maybe the most honest she had ever seen on his face. His phone buzzed. He looked at it. "Delia says everyone on the second floor is secured in the medication room." He paused. "She also says, and I am quoting directly, 'Tell Emma I am putting this woman's name in for every award this hospital has.'" Emma allowed herself one small thing. Not a smile exactly, the ghost of one. The territory where a smile lives before it decides to commit. "Tell her to focus on the patients," Emma said. Outside the door, she could hear voices now. Multiple. Coordinated. The kind of voices that come with vests and badges, and the specific authority of people who have trained for exactly this scenario. The crash of organized entry at the end of the corridor. Commands being given. Responses being received. The sound of a situation being resolved by people who had the resources to resolve it. Emma stood in the room and breathed. She checked the patient's monitor. She checked his dressing. She checked his eyes. She did all of it automatically, the nursing brain resuming its primary function, the way a river resumes its course after the obstruction is cleared. Not because it was told to, because it was the shape of the channel. "Vitals are good," she said. "I know," he said. "Your color is better." "I know that too." "I'm going to update the chart while we wait for the all clear," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. "Can you stop for 1 second?" he said. "Just 1 second." She looked at him. "You just held this room for 40 minutes with an IV stand, a trauma surgeon you don't even like, and a prayer," he said. "Can you acknowledge that for 1 second before you go back to charting?" She thought about this. She thought about what acknowledgement meant to her, what it had always meant, whether she needed it from outside or whether the internal ledger was always the one that mattered. But she was also, despite everything, a human being in a room with a man she had trusted with her life in a different world. And he was asking her for 1 second of honesty, and the least she could do was give it. "Yes," she said, "I can acknowledge that." "Good," he said, "now chart." She almost laughed. Not quite. But the territory where laughter lives before it decides to commit was briefly, warmly occupied. She picked up the chart. The radio on Garrett's hip crackled once more. "Building secure. All subjects in custody. East wing clear. Room 114, you are cleared to stand down." The room exhaled. All of them. Collectively. In the way that rooms do when the thing that has been pressing against them from the outside finally lifts. Vale set down the crash cart he had been holding and looked at his hands. He stood like that for a moment. Then he looked at Emma. She was writing in the chart. She did not look up. She was documenting everything. Timestamps, treatment decisions, observations. Everything that had happened in this room in the last 2 hours, recorded accurately, completely, in the careful language of someone who understood that the truth, documented properly, was its own kind of defense. "Reyes," Vale said. She kept writing. "What?" He was quiet for a moment. She heard him take a breath. She heard him consider and reconsider whatever it was he was going to say next. She heard him arrive at something that was probably more difficult for him than anything else that had happened to him tonight. "I owe you an apology," he said. Emma stopped writing. She did not turn around. She held the pen still on the chart, and she stood in the aftermath of those words, and she felt their weight, not because she needed them, but because they had cost him something real. And real things, even from imperfect sources, deserved to be received with some degree of care. She turned around. She looked at Carter Vale. The white coat, the sandy hair gone disheveled, the blue eyes that were, for the first time she had ever seen, doing something that actually resembled warmth. Not much, but enough. "You have a lot of them to get through," she said. "I know," he said. "Start with tonight," she said. "We'll figure out the rest later." He nodded, one nod, slow and deliberate. The nod of a man making a payment he should have made a long time ago. She turned back to the chart. She kept writing. Special Agent Torres was a compact woman in her early 40s with close-cropped hair and the kind of eyes that processed rooms the way scanners process documents. Fast, complete, missing nothing. She came through the door of room 114 at 12:31 a.m. with 2 agents behind her and the specific energy of someone who had been running on adrenaline and professionalism for several hours and had not yet decided which one was winning. She looked at the patient. She looked at Garrett. She looked at Vale. Then she looked at Emma, who was still writing in the chart, and she stopped looking at everyone else. "You're the nurse," Torres said. "I'm a nurse," Emma said. She did not look up from the chart. "There are 17 of us in the building tonight." "You're the one who called in the federal tip," Torres said. Emma finished the notation she was writing. She capped the pen. She looked up. "Garrett made the call." "On your instruction," Torres said. "On my suggestion," Emma said. Torres looked at her for a long moment with the expression of someone who has learned, through experience, to take careful inventory of people who make distinctions like that. "I'm going to need a full statement from you." "You'll have it," Emma said, "after I check his dressing and update the transfer documentation." Torres blinked. It was a very small blink, but it was there. The micro-expression of someone who had walked into a room expecting to be the most authoritative person in it and had discovered the position was already occupied. "The transfer authorization came through 12 minutes ago," she said, recalibrating. "We have a transport team staged in the south lot." "Give me 8 minutes," Emma said. She was already moving to the patient. Torres looked at Garrett. Garrett looked back at her with the expression of a man who had spent the last 2 hours watching Emma Reyes work and had no remaining capacity for surprise. He gave a small shrug that communicated everything and nothing. Torres stepped aside. Emma worked. She checked the wound dressing with the methodical attention she gave everything, not rushing because there were federal agents in the room, not performing because there were witnesses. The dressing was holding. The chest seal was intact. The IV line was running clean. She checked his pupils, his color, the quality of his breathing, the small physical vocabulary of a body that has been through significant trauma and is deciding, hour by hour, how it feels about that. Pain level, she said. 4, he said. She looked at him. 4.5, he said. I'm going to set up a portable pain management protocol for transport, she said. The transfer team will have it documented. You don't let it climb above 6 before you tell someone. Do you understand me? I understand you, he said. Say it back, she said. He looked at her. Something moved through his face. Not irritation, something warmer and more complicated. I don't let it climb above 6 before I tell someone, he said. And before you ask, yes, I actually mean it. Good. She made the final notation. She closed the chart. She looked at Torres. He's ready. Torres nodded and stepped into the corridor to coordinate. Vale moved to stand next to Emma in the particular way of someone who wants to say something but has not yet located the exact words. She was aware of him the way she was aware of most things in her peripheral field, tracked and cataloged. The girl, he said finally, Kayla, she made it through surgery. I know, Emma said. Delia told me at 10. Right, he paused. You knew before I did. Yes, another pause. The fast exam you ran in Bay 4, he said. That was the fastest and most accurate assessment I have seen run in this ER in 4 years. Emma looked at him. I know, she said. She said it without arrogance, just the same factual tone she used for everything, because it was true, and pretending it wasn't would not make Carter Vale feel better. It would just make the truth smaller, and the truth had spent enough time being made small in this building. Vale absorbed this. Where did you train, he said. Everywhere, she said. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now, she said. The longer version requires context you don't have clearance for. He stared at her. Clearance. It's an expression, she said, and she went to help prepare the patient for transport. The transport team came in at 12:47 a.m. 4 people, efficient and quiet, in the specific way of people who have been briefed and understand what they are moving and why it matters. They brought a proper transport gurney and the kind of portable monitoring equipment that did not apologize for itself. Emma gave the lead medic the full handover verbally, every detail, every decision made in the last 2 hours, every medication administered, every vital recorded, the kind of handover that leaves no ambiguity and no room for error. The lead medic, a young man named Reeves, who had the look of someone recently separated from military service, listened with total attention. He did not write anything down. He was the kind of person who didn't need to. Emma respected that immediately. Any final concerns before transfer, Reeves said. Watch the chest seal on turns, she said. He'll tell you he's fine. Weight his self-assessment about 30% below face value and act accordingly. Reeves looked at the patient. The patient looked back at him with an expression that communicated clearly that he did not endorse this characterization, and also that he knew it was accurate. Understood, Reeves said. They began transferring him to the transport gurney. Emma stood at the side and supervised the positioning, making minor adjustments to the angle of the back support, checking the IV line clearance during the move. When he was settled, and the leads were reconnected and the monitor was running clean, she stepped back. The patient turned his head and looked at her. The room had several people in it, Torres and her agents, Garrett, who was preparing to travel with the transport, Vale, standing near the door, Reeves and his team. But when the patient looked at Emma, the room contracted around that specific line of sight, the way rooms sometimes do when 2 people are having a conversation that belongs only to them. I'm going to need you to do something for me, he said. That depends on what it is, she said. I need you to stop hiding, he said. Emma was quiet. Not from them, he said. He meant the hospital, the ER, the world she had built here. You're not hiding from them. You never were. You're hiding from yourself. His voice was low, not private enough that the room couldn't hear, but quiet enough that it felt private. You built something good here. This place, these people. You built it on purpose, and you built it well. But you've been living in it at half volume. I've been living in it appropriately, she said. Appropriately, he repeated. That word. He shook his head slightly. You used to say that in the field, too. When I'd ask if you were okay after something bad, they preparing, Chief, as if being okay was a standard to meet rather than a thing to feel. Emma looked at him. She thought about 18 months of being deliberately small, of moving through this hospital like something that did not want to be noticed, of accepting the cruelties of men like Vale, not because she believed she deserved them, but because fighting back required being visible, and visible required being real, and real was expensive in ways she had not been ready to pay. I heard you, she said. I'll think about it. That's not a yes, he said. No, she said, but it's not a no either. She adjusted the blanket across his chest, a small, unnecessary gesture that was not clinical at all. Get some rest. Let people take care of you for once. He looked at her for one long moment. Then he said quietly, with that almost smile that had lived in the corner of his mouth all night, Yes, ma'am. She stepped back. They took him out. The room felt different when he was gone. Not empty, just reconfigured. The way rooms feel when the thing they have been organized around is removed and everything has to find a new position relative to everything else. Emma stood in the middle of it for approximately 4 seconds. Then she went back to work. Torres caught her in the corridor at 1:15 a.m. I still need that statement. I know, Emma said. Walk with me. They walked toward the nursing station on the East Wing, which had been cleared and recertified by Torres's team 30 minutes earlier. Emma gave her statement the way she did everything, accurately, completely, in the order that served clarity rather than the order that served her own interests. She did not minimize. She did not embellish. She described the situation, the decisions made, the actions taken, and the outcomes achieved, with the specific economy of language of someone who has given operational debriefs before and understands that the goal is truth, not narrative. Torres listened without interrupting. She took notes. At the end, she looked up and said, How long were you in service? 6 years, Emma said. What branch? I'd rather not say. Torres looked at her. The 2 subjects in custody are not talking. The ones who fled are being pursued. This is connected to an operation that goes a lot deeper than tonight. She paused. There may be additional security concerns in the coming weeks. For this hospital, Emma said. Potentially, Torres said, for this hospital and for the people who were in it tonight. Emma absorbed this. She thought about what it meant, about the ordinary Tuesday night that had become something else, and the question of what it would become next, and whether next was something she was equipped to handle, and whether equipped was the right word at all. Because equipped suggested preparation, and what she had always had was not preparation exactly, but something more permanent than that, something that did not require preparation because it had simply become part of the material she was made of. I can handle that, Emma said. Torres looked at her for a long moment. Then she took a card from her jacket and held it out. If anything changes, anything at all. Emma took the card. She looked at it. Special Agent Diana Torres. A phone number. A federal seal. She put it in her pocket. One more thing, Torres said. For what it's worth. She paused. What you did tonight, the containment, the coordination, keeping that room secure with the resources you had, that was not nursing. No, Emma agreed. It wasn't. But the way you took care of him, Torres said, in the middle of all of it, The vitals, the medication management, the handover documentation. She paused again, and when she spoke there was something in her voice that was unexpectedly human for a federal agent in the middle of an active case at 1 in the morning. That was. Emma looked at her. Yes, she said, it was. Torres nodded. She walked away. Emma stood in the corridor and let the building settle around her. The East Wing was quiet now, in the way that comes after disruption. Not the ordinary quiet of a Tuesday night, but the deeper quiet of a space that has been tested and has held. She could hear the familiar sounds filtering back in. A monitor, a call bell, the soft hydraulic of a door somewhere. Life resuming its honest, necessary work. She walked back toward the main nursing station. Delia was there. Of course she was. Delia, who had been in this hospital for 18 years and had seen things that would rearrange a lesser person's understanding of the world, was sitting at the station with her reading glasses on her forehead and a cup of coffee that Emma suspected was mostly cold, reviewing charts with the focused attention of someone who had decided that the best response to a chaotic night was a return to function. She looked up when Emma came in. She looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, "Sit down." Emma sat down. Delia slid a cup of coffee across the counter. It was hot. Emma picked it up and held it and felt the warmth move through her palms and up her arms. And she did not say anything, and Delia did not say anything. And this was, in its way, its own complete conversation. "Jameson wants to know if you're okay," Delia said finally. "Tell him yes. Park wants to know if you need anything. Tell her I'm good. I want to know," Delia said, "how long you've been carrying all of that around and not telling anybody." Emma looked at her coffee. 18 months, she said, give or take. Delia made a sound, not quite a word, more like the sound a person makes when something they suspected has been confirmed, and they are simultaneously right about it and sorry to be right. "That explains the locker room thing," she said. Emma looked up. "What locker room thing?" "The way you come in 2 minutes before every shift," Delia said, "and the way you check every exit in every room you walk into, and the way you always know exactly how many patients are in every bay without looking at the board." She set down her own coffee cup. "I've been doing this for 18 years, honey. I know what a person looks like when they're pretending to be smaller than they are." Emma was quiet. "For what it's worth," Delia said, "the pretending was very good." "Thank you," Emma said. "It wasn't a compliment," Delia said gently. "It was a diagnosis." Emma looked at her. Delia looked back with the expression of a woman who had sat with patients at 3 in the morning and had learned, over 18 years of those moments, that the most important thing you could offer another person was the truth delivered without cruelty. "I know," Emma said. "Good," Delia said. "Now drink your coffee." Emma drank her coffee. At 2:04 a.m., Carter Vale appeared at the nursing station. He had taken off the white coat. It was the first time Emma had ever seen him without it during a shift, and the effect was surprising, not because he looked smaller without it, but because he looked more like a person. He was carrying his coffee mug, and he set it on the counter and looked at Emma with the expression of someone who has spent the last hour thinking about what to say and has arrived at a version they are willing to commit to. "I've been practicing this," he said. Emma looked at him. "Don't practice it," she said. "Just say it." He exhaled. "I treated you badly," he said. "Consistently and deliberately. I used the authority this hospital gave me to make your job harder, and I told myself it was about standards or performance or any number of things that were not the actual reason." He paused. "The actual reason was that you're better than me at the parts of this job that require something other than credentials. And I knew it from about the 3rd week you were here, and I didn't know what to do with that, so I did the wrong thing instead." The nursing station was quiet. Delia was very busy looking at a chart she was definitely not reading. Emma held her coffee cup and looked at Carter Vale and thought about the supply cart and the syringes on the floor and every small diminishment that had accumulated over 18 months into something that had almost made her believe that shrinking was the right response. Almost. That took courage, she said. He looked slightly startled, as if he had expected something harder. Don't give me credit for things I should have done months ago. I'm not giving you credit, she said. I'm describing what I observed. She set down the cup. You have good hands, Carter. You're a good surgeon when you're not performing for the room. That's worth something. She looked at him steadily. So is tonight. He was quiet. The use of his first name had landed somewhere. She could see that. He was filing it away in whatever place people put things that shift their understanding of their own story. I'm going to speak to administration in the morning, he said, about tonight, about what I observed, about your role in what happened. I'll speak for myself, Emma said. I know you will, he said. I'd like to also speak, if you'll let me. Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she gave a single nod. Don't spin it, she said. Just tell them what happened. Just what happened, he agreed. He picked up his mug and walked away. Emma watched him go with the specific feeling of someone watching a door close on a version of a story and another one open. She did not know yet what the new version would look like. That was acceptable. She had learned over years of operating in uncertain terrain that not knowing the outcome was not the same as being lost, Delia said. Without looking up from the chart she was pretending to read. I have never in 18 years heard that man say the word sorry. He didn't say sorry, Emma said. No, Delia agreed. He said something harder. She turned a page. That counts. At 3:20 a.m., the ER returned to something close to its ordinary rhythm. The patients who had been shuffled for the supposed electrical maintenance were settled back into their rooms. The police presence had thinned to 2 officers completing documentation near the east entrance. Torres and her team had gone, leaving behind evidence markers in the corridor in a bureaucratic wake that would take weeks to fully navigate. The man on the floor of Corridor 4 had been processed and removed. The IV stand, dented now at the crossbar in a way that documented its recent history without words, had been returned to supply. Emma was checking on a patient in Bay 7, a 68-year-old man named Harold who had come in with atrial fibrillation and had been stabilized and was now telling her about his granddaughter's dance recital with the detailed enthusiasm of someone who had recently been reminded that life is worth reporting on when her phone buzzed. A text. No name attached. A number she recognized because she had never deleted it, even in 4 years of not using it, because there are numbers that belong to a category of things you do not delete even when you are trying to become someone different. The text said, transport arrived secure. Surgical team reviewing in the morning. Lung held on transport. Thank you. Emma read it once. She read it again. She set the phone back in her pocket. Harold said, everything okay, sweetheart? Emma looked at him. At his face, which was open and kind in the way that certain older people's faces are kind, worn into warmth by years of living. She thought about what the night had held, and what it had cost, and what it had returned to her that she hadn't known she'd been missing. She thought about Death Star, a name given to her by people who had seen her work in the dark and had decided it fit. She thought about Emma Reyes, a name she had chosen for herself when she chose the quieter life, and whether those 2 names had always belonged to the same person, and she had just needed a Tuesday night in a trauma center to prove it. She thought about the girl named Kayla, who was sleeping in post-op with her life intact because someone had refused to move when told to. She thought about the patient whose name she still had not said out loud in this hospital, and who had looked at her in room 114 and said, welcome back, in the voice of someone who had been waiting longer than he'd admitted. She thought about Delia and her reading glasses, and her 18 years in the cup of hot coffee slid across a counter without a word. She thought about Carter Vale, standing without his white coat, saying the word courage, and not knowing what he'd given her by saying it. She thought about all of it, and she felt it, completely, without managing it or filing it or converting it into something more efficient. She just let it be what it was. Then she looked at Harold and she said, "Everything's good. Tell me about the recital." Harold smiled. He told her about the recital. He told her about his granddaughter's costume, which was purple with silver stars, and how she had forgotten the second verse of her routine and had improvised something that was, in his professional opinion as her grandfather, significantly better than the original. He told her about his wife's face when they played the video back on the drive home. He told her the small, complete story of an ordinary evening that contained, the way ordinary evenings always do if you know how to look, everything that actually mattered. Emma listened, all the way through, without checking the monitor or updating the chart or scanning the room for exits. She just listened. When Harold's wife arrived at 3:40 a.m., breathless and apologetic for the hour, and the traffic and all the small indignities of a Tuesday night that had required her to cross the city at speed, she grabbed Emma's hand at the door and said, "Thank you for taking care of him." Emma looked at her hand in the woman's, and she felt the weight of it, the simple, enormous weight of being someone who takes care of people and is thanked for it. And she felt it all the way down. "That's what I'm here for," Emma said. She meant it completely. She had always meant it. The difference was that tonight, for the first time in 18 months, she was not saying it small. She walked back toward the nursing station through the quiet, amber-lit corridors of Mercy General Hospital, past the bays and the monitors and the people who were sleeping and healing and fighting and waiting, through the building that had tested her tonight and found her more than sufficient. And she walked not quietly, not invisibly, not like someone who was trying to take up less space than she was owed. She walked like herself. And that, after everything, was the most significant thing that happened at Mercy General on that Tuesday night. Not the surgery, not the containment, not the confession from a man who had spent 18 months being wrong about her in ways that had cost them both. The most significant thing was a quiet nurse who stopped being quiet about the wrong things and started being quiet only about the things that were hers alone to hold. Emma Reyes had not broken. She had not hidden. She had simply been waiting, with the patience of someone who understood that the right moment has its own clock, for the night that would ask her to be everything at once. The night had asked, she had answered, and the answer, when it finally came, had been exactly enough.